Welcome everyone to our launch event this morning for the Black Leadership Job Board. This is a joint venture between Morgan Hunt and the Black Leadership Group. My name is Clare Keniry and I'm a director at Morgan Hunt and lead on diversity and inclusion. And I'm delighted to introduce you to Robin Landman OBE, a co-founder and member of the executive team of the Black Leadership Group. He has a background in leadership in the further education sector in both the UK and South Africa. And we're also joined this morning by Amarjit Basi, who has held a number of senior leadership roles in further and higher education. And he is also a co-founder of the Black Leadership Group, as well as a member of the executive. Before we start this morning, just a few points around the structure of this session. The event will last for an hour. We'll finish at about 12 noon. We'll run through a brief intro to the Black Leadership Group and Morgan Hunt, and then an overview of the Black Leadership Job Board. We'll then have a panel discussion, and the plan is to leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So if you do have a question at any point through the session, please post it in the Q&A function on Teams. We will see all your questions and we'll endeavour to answer as many as possible, time permitting. So a brief introduction to Morgan Hunt. We are an award-winning recruitment business with over 150 consultants across London, Birmingham, Manchester, Milton Keynes and Glasgow. We've been in business for 28 years and are specialists in a number of sectors, including further and higher education, private and public sector, and the not-for-profit sector, to name just a few. And our goal is to live up to our mission of inspiring working lives by supporting our clients and candidates to create an inclusive working culture. Our relationship with the Black Leadership Group started back in 2020, when we were co-signatories to an open letter to the then Prime Minister addressing systematic racism in further education. And we're also very proud that we were the first private sector organisation to become an affiliate member of the Black Leadership Group. And today we're delighted to stand with the Black Leadership Group to launch the Black Leadership Job Board. So I'm going to pass you over to Robin, who will provide a brief intro for those of you who don't know anything about the Black Leadership Group. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you very much, Claire. And before I start my spiel about the Black Leadership Group, can I thank you and the team at Morgan Hunt for getting us to this point, and also my co-director, Amarjit, for all the work you've done to get us to this stage. My colleagues, it's great to be here. I think it's a really auspicious day for the Black Leadership Group. And you can see there what our key objective is. We exist to challenge systemic racism for the benefit of the whole of the UK, and for black communities in particular. And that mission to eradicate racism is clearly a big ask, and we can only do that successfully in partnership with progressive organisations like those that have chosen to join us today, and of course Morgan Hunt. It's important for you to note that we use black as an inclusive definition, not as specific to any particular geographic location. Now we've had a rapid growth rate, and as Claire said, Morgan Hunt was the first private sector organisation, but you can see there an outline of our membership in terms of affiliated organisations. We're operating across the 4 nations. We have 50 plus further education colleges affiliated to date and joining at a rapid rate. And we have national organisations like CDN in Scotland and the ETF in England in affiliations as well. And very importantly, we're working with Welsh Government to progress its anti-racist Wales 2030 ambition. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Robin. So the Black Leadership Job Board is really a progression of our joint collaboration around recruitment. And this job board is been created really to support organisations who wish to proactively tackle a lack of black talent within their leadership teams. So really, I thought it was a good starting point to look at the wider UK. And the picture across the wider UK, when this slide comes up, will show the real lack of progress for Black leaders. So this report is the June 2020 report, Race to the Top by Business in the Community. And it shows that just 1% of public sector and 1.5% of private sector leaders in the UK are Black. And this figure really has remained static over the last decade since their previous report in 2014. So that's our backdrop. And in the run-up to this launch, Morgan Hunt also surveyed our wider client base just to get a sense of where the organizations we work with on a day-to-day basis are. So some of the key results from that where 85% of the respondents noted a lack of diversity or a significant lack of diversity in leadership positions within their industry. And another key finding was that 15% had set goals to increase that representation, with a further 13% currently looking to set them. So a relatively small proportion of organizations that we engaged with. Though the stats are better for organizations being able to provide data on their current representation of Black professionals within their organizations. So 57% of organizations had that data to hand, and a further 20% were planning to collect it. So at least those organizations will know their starting point. But moving on to the job board itself, it is aimed at organizations who, via data collection internally themselves, have identified a lack of Black talent and are keen to change that. So just a few points around how it will work. The job board will be free of charge for all direct employer organizations who wish to use it to advertise their opportunities up until October of this year. There will be a cost, but we will communicate that in August after the first 6 months. However, Black leadership affiliate organisations will have a separate arrangement after October 2023, and that will be communicated over the next few months. So we will send out information after this event, but just to be aware, you can access the job board via the Black leadership website itself directly, and there's a simple drop-down menu for the board, and within there's a very simple process to register a vacancy. Like I say, we will send out all of this information after the session, and you'll see where the links are. There's also a link to the Black Leadership Job Board via Morgan Hunt. So there's two ways of accessing it. So to kick our conversation off this morning, and Robin, I'll come to you as you've run kindly through that, introduction to the Black Leadership Group itself. Just to set this in context, can you talk us through the key goals of the Black Leadership Group over the next 12 months from your perspective?
Thanks, Claire. We've got 10 business objectives for 22-23. I won't bore you with the full list today, colleagues, but I'll talk about 4 which I think are germane to the launch. The first one for our reference is affiliation growth. We can't change or tackle systemic racism without working with progressive organisations that want to change the status quo. So part of the proposition here is to give affiliate organisations and other progressive organisations the opportunity to plug the gaps that Claire so clearly enunciated this morning. We also have an obligation to make it possible for Black talent to get to the places where their talent will be recognised and rewarded. So there's a two-pronged approach here. We want to work with affiliate organisations to close the gap, but we also want to provide a conduit for Black talent, which is there in copious quantity, I have to say. There is no dearth of Black talent, but there is a reluctance to go looking for it. And I would say at this point that often organisations that think there is no Black talent overlook the fact that Black people don't want to be the only person on a leadership team or in an organisation. They want to be there on merit, and they want to be there and feel that their talents will be given a fair chance of success. The third area we want to address is to address the Black leadership pipeline crisis. Now, we all know that we're in the midst of a labour shortage, and yet at the same time, Black unemployment rates are climbing. So that gives us an indication that maybe organisations aren't looking in the right place to plug employment gaps. So our role as an organisation is to make sure that we give every Black person with the talent and the capability the biggest opportunity possible to get to a place where their talents can be recognised and rewarded. And the final thing I'd say is, on the 21st of March this month, we have our annual conference, and this issue is going to be addressed full on. So if you haven't already got a ticket, please consider coming along, because you'll be working with others to plug those gaps. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Robin. So, Amarjit, from your perspective, how do you believe that creating a Black leadership job board will support some of the goals that Robin's just laid out?
I think 2 or 3 things really drive it, Claire. I think the first thing is that I envisage them, and looking at the attendance today, there's no need to convince those people who are participating in their organisations on the case for Black talent. And as you rightly said, the gaps that emerge, I think they're absolutely cognizant of the importance to redress that imbalance. But I think one of the things that's come from the discussions we've had with organisations is they have found it difficult to connect the notion of vacancies and jobs, and inviting and connecting to people who may be interested in the job, people who may be looking at promotion, people looking maybe to move beyond their organisation positively, and others. And what we tried to do is actually support in a very informal way over the last 18 months. So we've had probably hundreds and hundreds of requests from our affiliate organisations, and vice versa, from potential candidates who want to be put in touch. And if I'm perfectly honest, it's tended to be informal, not necessarily systematic, not structured, and so on. And I think it's a natural course of the maturity of the conversations we're having, not just with our affiliate organisations, but other organisations across the whole of the public sector, in the context of how can we make it easier. And I think that's the direct response and results of the Black Leadership Job Board.
Thank you, Amarjit. So obviously, yeah, the data that I shared for the UK can make pretty depressing reading, and can be difficult and disheartening for business leaders to know really where to start. As I've already said, Robin, Black employees hold just 1.5% of top management roles in the private sector, and 1% in the public sector. So what tips have you got for them, the leadership teams, in terms of where to start to address this imbalance right now?
I would say this wouldn't lie, but I think the good starting point would be to affiliate with a Black leadership group. One of the things that's come about is because when we launched our open letter back in 2020, which you very kindly signed, Claire, on behalf of Morgan Hunt, it was clear that people were looking for an answer to a question that's been dogging the country for years. We're 12 years into the Equality Act, and in that time, representation, senior and middle management representation of the Black communities has declined. And I think what organizations can't do is rely on policies and procedures to change the picture. They have to take action. If you're not sure about the action to take, look around you at the constituency that you serve and see whether that is an ethnically diverse one or not. Even if it's not ethnically diverse, it still has to be the case that the whole country represents the talent pool that we all rely on for the economic prosperity that we want for the country, the whole country. And until we use the whole talent pool, it's not going to be possible for us to achieve that social cohesion or that economic prosperity. Now, we can help you, but actually, this is just a business test. Leaders need to be able to understand that a representative workforce comes about as a result of intervention rather than policies and procedures. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. So proactive intervention. Yeah.
Mm.
Amarjit, again, kind of going back to the poll that we did with our client base prior to this event or the launch, we saw that 57% of those who responded said their organization currently tracks data on the ethnicity of their leadership team, and a further 20% were planning to start to collect that kind of data. So, to your mind, what's the value of even tracking that employee data? And then the second question, really, the value of setting goals and targets for Black leaders in their organisation?
Thanks for pointing out the two elements, Claire, because your slides identified that discrepancy between the intention to collect data and what they're going to do with it. So it almost made me think about the Bananarama song. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. You know, that sort of comes to me, which is collecting data is a starting point. The nature of the data collection is important. And one of the things that we advocate is looking at key data points that link in with the employee cycle, because it's not just about recruitment and attraction, it's about retention, it's about progression, it's also about exiting the organization. So data that sort of captures the story with regards to the fullness of the employee cycle, but it's also not just numerical data in the context of what's really going on, the lived experience, the unspoken elements, and sort of sensitive elements of the feelings, but also the encounters that people have during that element. And then you'd expect me to say this, it's once you've collected that data, it requires courageous, committed, and pretty decisive leadership to determine where and how you do that, and that requires a proactive approach. Again, I think one of the traits that we see with quite a few organizations that we work with is they collect data from a defensive proposition to justify what they don't need to change, as opposed to identifying the gaps, the opportunities and others. And that's why I thought your slide deck, in the context of pretty low propensity of setting targets, probably is a little bit of an alarm call, I think.
Yeah,
hope that helps.
Yeah, no, thanks, Amarjit. That kind of ties in, doesn't it? With and Robin, I mean, this is kind of an extension really of what Amarjit's already been saying. But once an organisation has this data on their leadership, and hopefully then that in itself shows that they're open now to maybe take some action. What's your advice on the next and most appropriate steps they could take at that point?
Well, Claire, fortunately, we have historical examples of changes that have been made. We know that there was a massive underrepresentation of female leadership in this country 20 years ago, and we know that's changed quite considerably. And that's changed because A, there was a recognition that 50% of the population were being ignored to the cost of the country. And secondly, it's changed because action was taken to address it. And that action was taken largely by male leaders who mentored, coached, and looked for talent. So we know it can be done. And that's what we need to do again. We need to say it's not just a lack of diversity from gender point perspective. It's about the ethnic minority population of the country. Now, 20 years ago, that population would have been talked about in single-digit statistics, right? We're now at 20% of the population and climbing. In terms of the young people in this country, 32% of school-aged children are from Black communities. In terms of graduates, it's near 30%. In terms of further education, it's 32%. So those young people need to see themselves reflected in the leadership of organizations they attend and the organizations that they want to work in. So the appropriate steps is to do what's been done before, which is to get active. For us, anti-racism is a verb. Leaders know how to change this because they've done it before. And if they need help, we're there to offer advice and guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And in terms of, you know, an organisation that wants to move, or there are individuals in that organisation, Amarjit, that want to move, what are your tips for ensuring that those people can bring everyone with them? So, you know, I'm sure you've seen it, there are organisations and some stakeholders are really keen to take proactive action, but they can struggle to ensure, you know, they bring those internal stakeholders along with them and realise that inclusive recruitment isn't about just hitting a certain quota or lowering a bar to allow less qualified people in, you know, which is sometimes a bit of a resistance that some organisations can get. What are your tips on that, Amarjit?
I think the first thing is, and I've had the privilege of working with many organisations over the past 2 years, a number of them represented at this webinar today, so they'll be familiar with this, which is really present a positive case for change. And if you can picture a Venn diagram which identifies clearly there's a legal, you know, sort of incumbency here, there's the moral ethical case, George Floyd, etc., and then there's the business case, very graphically illustrated by numerous reports, namely McKinsey, and a very recent one by WPP, which identifies, you know, how critical that is. And that's best done in the language and the vocabulary and the narrative that suits the context of the organization. So it's very much about owning a compelling narrative, which is a win-win for everyone, including, you know, and this is really important, including white people in organizations. What's the benefit? What is it, you know, going to be a compelling positive case for change? And then I also think it's breaking some myths, and three myths that's already been alluded to. One is people present this myth that there's a lack of Black talent, yeah, and they mistake that in the context of possibly, you know, maybe some of the messages that are emitted from the organization. And what's been fantastic over the past 18 months is the work on mentoring, the work on sponsorship, the work on building, in many cases, aspiration is really critical. And managers and leaders recognizing their part in tapping people on the shoulder in the context of possibilities. And that's going beyond fair processes and practices which look great on paper, but the, you know, the act of applying and pushing yourself forward is not just a technical process, it's an emotional process. and those organizations more progressive get that. I think the other element is there's a myth about lack of aspiration, and there's also a myth about lowering the bar. You know, the quality isn't there, for example. I don't know, people saw a very recent report from The Economist of other population, which actually saying Bangladeshi children and Bangladeshi girls are doing, quote, astoundingly well through the education system. They're breaking the buck and so on, whatever. And yet it's Bangladeshi girls who are struggling most to get into the job market. So what's going on there? You know, what are the myths, the wisdoms, the common, you know, sort of observations being made? So, you know, I think in redressing the conversation, the point about internal stakeholders, it's win-win, compelling narrative, and actually also actions which follow the words and the processes, I think. And by the way, it's legal. It's legal to take positive action.
Yeah.
In redressing balances. And one of the things we have to remind, forgive me, this organizations, that it is possible to identify actions which seek to address gaps in your workforce. That's absolutely permissible.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Amarjit. And I think, Robin, you wanted to add something there as well.
I just wanted to amplify that point that Anna just made. The BLG is against lowering the bar in any way, shape or form to address this, because it sets people up to fail. And also, no black person wants to be appointed as a token. They want to be there on merit. So I don't think any organisation can justifiably use this as an excuse for not finding talent. They need to look at inside themselves to see what they need to do better in order to change the outcomes for them.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you. And Robin, I'll come back to you. In our poll, I think it was just shy of 31% of respondents said their organisations had set goals for increasing diversity. And actually, that's wrong. Apologies, I've got the wrong data. It was 15%. Apologies, that was related to a different part of the poll. But anyway, 15%, which we know and we commented is low. So I've actually set those goals in terms of increasing diversity and representation of Black professionals in their organisation. So that's a low figure. And just to reiterate, why do you think it's important that more organisations, you know, have those goals and set those goals for themselves?
Okay, well, gathering data helps you establish a baseline, and setting a goal helps you to track your progress towards any goals that you may have set. So if an organisation has established its baseline, now it has set, presumably, ambitious goals to redress that imbalance, they will need to know over time, longitudinally, how they're doing in order to achieve it. You know, it's simple. It's standard practice for leaders to set growth or quality improvement goals, and there's no exception in this at all. Goal setting is critical, and you know, they have to be ambitious, and they have to be changed over time. So once you've got to a certain level, there's no need to stop. You can just keep on raising the bar.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. Amarjit, again, the poll that we did with our clients prior to this event showed that 85% of respondents stated that they noticed a real lack of diversity, specifically within the leadership in their sector. So they were talking more widely than their own organisation, but across the sector. What are your thoughts on that? It's quite a large figure.
It is what it is, you know, and accept it as a baseline. I'd rather respond to that in citing that it is within your gift to do something about it and do things differently, and maybe just give 2 or 3 examples of that, Claire, again drawn from the experience of the last couple of years. One is even organizations in non-diverse contexts can signal their intent to diversify their workforce in the context of, for example, changing the performance of the organization. And we've got a lovely example in non-diverse Humberside, where a public sector organization determined that for them to move to their next phase of performance, they needed to attract diverse talent, which included ethnic minority talent. So they took 2 people from very, very diverse comfort zones of London and the conurbation of East Midlands, and they have invested in creating an environment where those 2 people are absolutely excelling at the moment, and that's been publicly and officially recognised by regulators on the transformational element of that brave act in the context of, you know, if there was any case for not being compelled to look at diversity, it'd be in this particular catchment area, but the benefits have been exponential because you've got an imaginative, courageous, convicted, committed group of leaders, including board representation, who get it. Another example is that, to a degree, a different example, which is because of the growing distribution of ethnic groups, people will often ask us, where do we go to advertise and recruit talent? And we look at public sector organizations, and interestingly, including private sector organizations, say, go where your client base come from. Right? So if you think about hospital trusts, community organizations, education providers, exponentially, they are growing. They have a very large and exponentially growing ethnic client base. They're on your doorstep. So the notion is you can grow your own. And the third example, I think, is that some of the ethnic minority young people do not receive the messages in their interactions with their line managers that the conversation and the commitment is about career progression. And that can be translated into the lack of ambition. And therefore, we've seen transformational change in practice where the conversation, you know, people will swear that they have appraisal systems and so on, whatever. What we have got to a degree from the feedback, the informal feedback, is those appraisals are used for anything other than the conversation about career progression. And where that has changed, it's been transformational for those individuals.
Thank you, Amarjit. Just a quick note for everybody, all our attendees, if you didn't catch it at the beginning, if anyone does want to ask any questions, which we'll leave a bit of time towards the end, please just use the Q&A function on Teams and we'll see your question. Thank you. So Robin, coming back to the Black Leadership Job Board, as I've already said, and it's probably worth reiterating, the website will allow organisations to post adverts directly through the Black Leadership Group website. There's a very quick and easy process there. Initially, that'll be free of charge for the first 6 months, and then we will communicate changes after that. And all these leadership vacancies will be available to be viewed publicly, but they'll also be circulated around the Black Leadership Group membership. So I thought it was worth, if you could explain to everyone who's not familiar with your work, what your membership network is like and how you interact with those individuals, please.
Okay, there are 2 areas for clarity. One is The affiliation route is for organizations. Okay, so affiliation is by turnover. There's a fee for an annual fee for affiliation, and in addition to the annual fee, there's a one-off CPD training element which is mandatory for organizations. Both are pretty cheap for what you get, and we'd be happy to explain that in more detail. So that's the organizational route, and then we look to support individuals, Black individuals, in their career aspirations, and that's really important because we're an activist group. We're an activist group, and we want our members to be activists. We don't want them to be bystanders. They need to engage and act as leadership, as leaders in their own right. And we support them through 3 key routes. One is we have a BLG mentoring program in which they can be supported by senior Black colleagues. We have a CPD program which is run in partnership with one of our other recruitment partners, FEA, and that is to help them to build up their portfolio of skills and make them more employable, increase their chances of promotion. And thirdly, we have Black leadership group, special interest groups, so that people can find a mechanism to work on their particular areas of interest, or to establish ways of routes to give back. So affiliation on the one hand for members, for organizations, sorry, and the Black membership for individuals. We would really urge affiliate organizations to signpost that element to their Black staff so that we can enhance the training and progression of their colleagues.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. And in terms of individuals on this session who might be interested in becoming a member, I mean, we can the affiliate information, I believe, is on your website, so we'll circulate that after this session. But how does somebody become a member of Black Leadership Group?
They can just email me in the first instance, and I'll be able to give them the mechanism. So robin@blackleadershipgroup.com.
Great, thank you, Robin. We will put all the direct contact information with the pack that goes out after the session, so everyone should have that. But okay, Amarjit, I mentioned this to you earlier in the week. You know, we've been posting and signaling the event is coming up, and we've received some comments back via social media around the launch of the Black Leadership Job Board, with individuals pointing out that they feel it is exclusive and making other people feel less inclusive. And you know, a job board like this will cause separation, not integration. And I'll mention those have come from people from, you know, lots of different ethnic backgrounds. So, you know, interesting comments. What is your response to that kind of response to the launch of the Black Leadership Job Board? Sorry, Amarjit, you're on mute.
Thanks, Claire. I think my first thoughts were, if things were working well and in an ideal world, we wouldn't need this. The second thing is that it's in response to demand. People have asked, I think I've already alluded, to make it easier to connect recruiting organizations with aspirational, talented staff. And thirdly, it is, we've got an industry of recruitment agencies UK-wide, and we don't want to, you know, sort of replicate or purport. We want to work and influence, you know, those very, very capable and competent organizations, but we also wanted to offer something different. And hopefully it'll be transient and we can accelerate this. So did we set out to do this? No. Should we need to do this? No. But what you've got is, as Robin said, an exponentially mismatch between the unmitted growth proportion of the population who are black in that pluralistic sense, but the curiosity that they're not getting the jobs and they're not getting the position and so on. So do we sit and be passive, or do we move into an active phase? And I apologize. We apologize if people find that offensive. It's not where we would want to be.
Thank you. Thanks, Amarjit. And Robin, we've talked about you mentioned the affiliate membership of the organisations, which is open to organisations that want to partner and collaborate with Black Leadership Group. So we've talked about what I'm a member, what that would look like, but what kind of support and services do the Black Leadership Group offer to affiliate members, affiliate organisations?
Well, the first thing you get is that CPD package, and that CPD package is excellent. It's the best training that I've ever observed in my, God knows how many years I've been in the FE sector, and I won't spare Amarjit's blushes. He has produced a program which is outstanding, and it's been very, very widely and generously applauded by those who have taken part. And that is the starting point. It gives organizations an insight based on a bespoke program. Every single induction training program and every single train the trainers program, which is what you get from the package, is geared to that particular organization. It's not a one size fits all in any way, shape or form. And by that mechanism, organizations are able to set their own objectives, set their own pathway towards becoming an anti-racist organization, and track their progress. It's our purpose to ensure that organizations develop the capacity internally to make this progress. We don't want them to become dependent on us or on the army of EDI consultants that are out there. They need to have the confidence to get through the uncomfortable stage, which we know is there, to a point where they can set off on their journey confident in the fact that they've got the capacity to achieve it. Now, in addition to that, every organization that's affiliated has a portfolio holder, one of the directors, who is there to provide support. But in addition to what I've described already, we have a community of practice, so that every organization can be represented in a user group, both to improve the diagnostic toolkit, but also to support each other and to share good news, and also, to provide some critical analysis of what could be improved.
Great, thank you, Robin. Yeah, thank you. And just to finish off with our kind of conversation, and we'll move on to some questions. Amarjit, I just thought you mentioned, or Robin mentioned, the 3rd annual conference that Black Leadership are holding on the 21st of March, so very soon. And the theme is Make the Path by Walking It. Can you give us an overview of what that conference is all about? Hi, Amarjit, you're on mute again.
I do apologise.
Invite
Robin to chip in as well, but I think the title is really, sort of significant in the context of what the purpose of the conference is, which is, and I think it's been part of the theme this morning, Claire, which is, we know the extent of the challenge, we know the statistics, we know, some of the issues, but how can we further mobilize a sense of community and action, which is solutions focused? and for you to determine what that path is, and for us to, you know, sort of work through a day where people are given exposure to some amazing practice, some inspirational organizations and individuals that cross across different sectors, public and private sector, education and non-education, the 4 nations. There's work going on and there'll be inputs there, but it's all about solutions focused, not about victimhood.
Thank you. Thanks, Amarjit. And again, there'll be information on that when we send some round after the event. So I just wanted to cover off some questions, if we could, that we've had from our attendee list. So first one here is from Katie. Very keen to progress to setting targets and have support for positive action from executive, particularly in recruitment to start with, which is powerful. However, in the absence of recent data from the Scottish census, we feel a little tied as we do not know what we can aim for. I'm very keen to at least replicate the population percentages, but want to exceed ideally. But with that data, I'm working on old information. So to aim high is my goal, but would prefer some real data, particularly for my messaging. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I can respond directly to that really important observation and question. And it's really timely. We've been analysing and preparing some data for the Scottish audience, and we're going to be inputting into a couple of public conferences in the coming months. But I'll give a spoiler. I think I hope this is helpful for Katie, which is Katie, just go to the data on the ethnic mix of the school population roll in Scotland and have a look at the changing mix and the proportion of ethnic representation in primary and secondary school, and start preparing for a change in the demographics. So what we find that the dated data, and there's still a delay in the census collection release in Scotland, which means it's not as up to speed in other parts of the UK. But actually, notwithstanding that, and notwithstanding that the perception is, if you want diversity, just go to Edinburgh and Glasgow. Look at the school population roll statistics, and you've got the privilege, perhaps, that other parts of the UK is, that gives you some space to prepare for expansive ethnicity.
Thank you, Amarjit. In terms of, yeah, there's just another question, and there's a couple like this, so I'll address them. Really inspiring presentation this morning. Thank you. Struck by anti-racism as a verb in particular. With that in mind, are you able to give us a sense of how recruitment teams will be able to access the job board? Will we be able to post jobs directly via our recruitment systems? And then there's another one asking when things are going to go live. So I'll address that from I suppose, the technical perspective as to how that's going to work. Initially, it won't work through recruitment systems. It's a standalone board right now for the first 6 months. We then, between us, I'll be talking to Robin and looking at how we then progress it, and we can immerse it in, I suppose, the ecosystem of other job boards. Initially, it'll be through that very simple link, which will go live this afternoon, where you can just post a vacancy, and so it will need to be outside of your standard systems right now. But like I say, we will be looking at changing that process over the next 6 months. Really, we want to see the engagement levels and how it all goes, and then what are, you know, the organizations that are engaging and posting, get some feedback from you, and go from there. So that's how it'll be, but we'll be going live, like I say, as of this afternoon. So any questions, there'll be information on what we send round afterwards in terms of where to go with that. Thank you. I've got another question that actually came to me in advance of the event. but somebody who couldn't attend but wanted to ask. And they are Black professional, and they are keen to progress and you know, want to move up to the next level within their organization. I'm afraid I don't know, you know, what they do specifically and the sector they work in, but they struggle due to lack of support and confidence. And it was a more general question, you know, when you're in that situation. And from the question, I get the impression that there aren't a lot of other Black leaders within the organization. You know, what would you advise an individual in that situation to do in terms of putting themselves out there, but have the confidence to put themselves out there?
I'll have first stab at this one. I think this is a real clear case of somebody who needs a mentor. I think somebody who's struggling with projecting their own self-confidence and improving it needs to sit down with somebody who's gone ahead of them, if you like, and you know, experience the process themselves, can give them some guidance. So I think this is one of the reasons why we set up the Black Leadership Group mentoring program, to help build the confidence of people who feel isolated and don't feel supported in their own organizations. And you know, that's something that we can offer them if they want to get in touch with us.
Great, thank you, Robin. So one reason to become a member, because that's just part of a lot of what is offered by the Black Leadership Group already. Great, thank you. I've got another question here, which again I'll deal with, because it's probably a little bit more related to the mechanics around the board, but also I might ask one of you to talk around how we'll work with the network. But there are other well-established similar job boards. You mentioned that vacancies will be distributed to the Black Leadership members, but how else will the new job board be promoted? So they're asking around search engine optimization, marketing campaigns, and e-shots. So great question. Obviously, we've got the reach of Morgan Hunt in terms of our candidate database. So we've been in operation for 28 years, and we have hundreds of thousands of candidates on our database, both passive and active. So we would look to promote, first of all, the launch of the board to that community straight off, but equally on a kind of regular basis, run campaigns to promote the vacancies on there on a monthly basis, just to keep that profile up. We obviously do a lot of work ourselves as an organisation around our own SEO, around our own website, Morgan Hunt. And as I've already mentioned, the Black Leadership Job Board will feature on the Black Leadership Group, but there will also be a feature on the Morgan Hunt website. So everything we do as a recruiter, and it's very close to our heart around search engine optimization and making sure that, you know, we are running regular marketing campaigns to keep our candidate generation or our candidate flow high for our client base, and mainly also engaging with those passive candidates, given the state of the job market, as Robin alluded to, and the real fight for talent right now. That's something that we do a lot of. So there'll be a whole campaign around it, and it'll be something that, well, I've already initially spoken to Amarjit and Robin about, but we'll look at running campaigns as the Black Leadership membership itself increases. That's already a pool of potential talent coming through, that we can also highlight the vacancies too. I've got, well, I think one final question, if that's okay, and it'll probably go to either the Robin or Amarjit. Being part of a public sector HEI organisation, I feel at times there's fear to be courageous about addressing the mismatch in the workforce and taking obvious positive action to directly address minority groups. How can we change this attitude? So I don't know which one, who wants to take that?
I'll start if I may. It's just picking up the point about the verb, and I think one of the things that we really instill is it really is within your gift to do something, but it requires organizational culture. It requires real leadership and a commitment towards deep and sustainable change. And some of that change can be very quick. Others will be sort of more medium and long term. So we talk about the difference from being non-racist to anti-racist, and there's a whole set of characteristics that that we use to define organizations and teams and individuals. And if you don't mind me saying, HE is really held back in the context of that they spend exponential time measuring the pig and identifying the extent of the issue, and very little time proven by evidence and data in actually changing effectively the mix. I'm sorry to say that, but HE, is notorious in the context of some of the culture changes, but not isolated to that. I think it does require decisive leadership, urgency, and doing things differently. Again, very quick examples. We're working with a whole swathe of colleges in Wales linked into the Anti-Racist Wales. One organisation had recognised that the gatekeepers with regards to recruitment processes, not just the dedicated professionals in HR, but all the recruiting managers of a particular disposition. So they asked us to develop a bespoke training programme for HR professionals in the context of what true anti-racist recruitment processes and decisions and flows look like. That's bespoke to organizations, but it's also thinking about, I was thinking about Robin's point, which is, having mentors who come out of the organization for that support. I still feel it's the deficit model. How do you create the psychological safety in your organization so that person feels that they can access the support, have the honest conversations and other things? And you can only do that by a real focus and commitment on culture change.
Thank you. Thanks, Amarjit. I've had a few questions again, which I'll pick up on around the levels of roles to post on the job board, the Black Leadership Job Board. Clearly, we want leadership roles, and we want roles that are progressing into leadership. So we've not put some very hard and fast rules, but we will be, in terms of the information we send out, we'll be encouraging organisations to advertise those roles that offer a genuine leadership progression within their organisation.